So, with me here today is the former CEO of Encana, Mr. Gwyn Morgan. Gwyn has spent decades building North America's leading energy company, and he has served on many corporate leadership positions, including as the director of the world's largest global bank, the Bank of Hong Kong. So, I want to extend a warm welcome to you, Gwyn Morgan. So glad you could join us.
Hey, you're good to be here.
Well, I'm very excited about our conversation because I know last time we talked about the state of Canadian energy, and it is just our heads are spinning with the things that are going on. I know that one of the things that was top of mind was the war in Ukraine and the whole issues regarding reliable energy, secure energy, as Russian supplies were under doubt. But I did want to catch up with some really basic questions to help set the stage here for our discussion. And that has to do with a really basic question. Why are fossil fuels, namely oil and gas, so important to our way of life here in Canada?
David, it's not just a question of what our way of life in Canada. The fossil fuels are fundamental to everything. All the food we eat, all the stuff we use, all the cars we
Hmm.
drive, all the electronic stuff we're working on right now is produced from fossil fuel energy, from fossil fuels. So, this sort of daydream that somehow we're going to switch over when there isn't any alternative. And
Mhm.
when you're thinking about science, and obviously in my business world, uh, you did the possible. You didn't worry. Didn't try to do the impossible just because you quote believe. And so that is a sort of a fundamental thing that. But the state of Canadian energy is interesting because, of course, I think I grew up and built my company in the golden days when actually people thought that producing oil and gas was a good thing, and it was needed by the world and by the country and the community in terms of its jobs and all of the other advantages. So I feel that I watched in my retirement years, watched all this just sort of attitude for one of the countries, one of the world's largest supplies, resources of energy in Canada, be constantly made as difficult as possible to produce and move.
Isn't that something? So energy really is foundational. It's in every part of our lives. And do you suspect Canadians almost take that for granted, that reality?
Well, I think they take it for granted in a lot of ways, of course, until they don't have it.
It's
And so we have it, and despite the efforts of the Liberal government for years and years to try and diminish its production level and everything else and its development, it's still fundamental to Canadians, and they know that.
No, I agree. And you've written a very interesting recent column about how Canadian liquefied natural gas can be really a solution to a lot of challenges. Can you tell us more about your key points that you were emphasizing in your column?
Yes, well, the thing where I got the sort of a motivation to start writing a column was when uh, as Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives have been axing the tax as hard as they could, or at least campaigning that way. And yet, I say, well, okay, well, that's fine. There's people starting to answer the question, okay, well, if you don't have that emissions control policy, what do you have, Pierre? And so that's
Yeah.
why I said, got onto this column because there's a way of not only uh, controlling emissions, but to actually bring revenue and riches to our country and jobs and that we badly need. So, and that's export of natural gas, liquid natural gas. I go back a long ways with this because the only project to survive out of 20 that was proposed in 2010 was the LNG Canada project. All the other ones, because of the Liberal government making it so difficult, they just gave up. They spent billions and billions of dollars and just gave up. But LNG Canada, Andy Calitz, the guy that was running it, he's a South African, wasn't going to give up. He wasn't that kind of a guy, and I was very close to him. Uh, And so he just kept hanging in there. And now the $33 billion project is almost ready to come to fruition. The other 20, the other 19, um, what I think we need to do is have a policy that actually encourages LNG, and some of those 19 will come back and create even more jobs and more energy for the world, while also, by the way, reducing emissions by 50% for the coal dependent countries like China.
So this is a very interesting point. Canada has extraordinary, and you know this better than anyone, extraordinary natural gas reserves. We've got this incredible project coming on stream in Kitimat in northern British Columbia, and that's going to create enormous opportunity. But we've got so many others that were sidelined due to difficult regulations in the environment, the environmental context. So you're saying we should get on with developing those incredible LNG resources, and in the process actually help the world's environment. Is that what you're saying?
It will help the world's environment in a substantial way. Do you know that since the COP meeting in 2015, the original one, uh, the coal-fired emissions have skyrocketed. That's an irony, and most of it, of course, in China and India, and it's China and India that we're closest. We're the closest distance to send LNG of any other country, and so and they want the fuel. So it's a huge economic opportunity, uh, and this is just one project is huge opportunity. This is an
It's not.
opportunity to create jobs, create wealth, and do well with good for the world as well at the same time. It's a no-brainer, and meanwhile we have the carbon tax that's actually destroying the livelihoods of farmers who are trying to fertilize their crops and all kinds of other people, and and it's doing 0.001% good for emissions.
So yeah, this is I don't know what to use the word ironic, paradoxical. There's so many angles you could describe this, but here we have one of our ace cards to our economy. Gwyn, has been affordable, reliable, dependable energy. And this goes for every part of every sector of our economy: forestry, agriculture, as you mentioned, manufacturing. So if we can develop that even more, it's a win for manufacturing sector as well. And ironically, the last few decades, we've done an incredible job really outsourcing a lot of manufacturing to, what is it called again? Oh, yeah, China, among other countries. So isn't there's this paradox that we're bringing in, importing all these manufactured goods from China, from really bad energy industries and dirty polluting ones, and we should actually be the home for both manufacturing and exporting clean energy to those very places like China. Is that kind of the
And,
heart of
and
what
we
you're
have
saying?
we have enormous ability to do that. And at the same time, we're going to have a huge, as you say, a huge lift in our economy in a number of ways. Not only jobs, just one of these projects creates so many jobs in manufacturing, it's transportation, and so on, and all of the other resources that are used that we have here in Canada. So it's just one project is gigantic, but if we unleash the real capability, it can be the biggest thing, the biggest uplift of Canadian's economy probably ever.
I totally agree. So let's pay attention to Gwyn Morgan's proposal. He's outlined that in his writings, and I think all this is in the perspective of increased demand for energy from around the world. And this is something that perhaps Canadians are not aware of, as well as the importance to this industry to Canadians. And so for me, I think this is just such a head scratcher in this day where we hear words like net zero, just transition, all these policies largely coming from the federal government and their associated interest groups and activists funded by so many foreign foundations, ironically, that had this relentless war on Canadian oil and gas. I mean, this is insane. So why are we going down this path, Gwyn? I know you've watched this for a long time, but How do you make sense of this to Canadians?
Well, I stay tuned and look at what other countries are doing, and there's not a country in the world that aren't amazed at what Canada's doing to their energy industry. Most of them, even, after the Ukrainian war started, I mean, all the issues of Europe, their biggest thing is trying to get more LNG.
Mm.
Uh, and and if you look around the world, there's countries that are increasingly short of energy, and they can't believe that Canada, with all our resources,
Right.
are doing everything it could to hamper its development and production.
Well, it really is remarkable. So you're saying that from your perspective as a corporate leader that has a world perspective, Canada is truly an outlier when it comes to these radical environmental policies?
Yeah, we're an outlier. We're a laughing stock. There's a whole bunch of things you could put out about it,
Hmm.
but at least our prime minister is. But I think that it's just it makes no sense to anyone. I mean, here we have China emissions continue to grow. They have gone
Mhm.
up by a huge amount, all coal, and and we could replace that, and they'd like us to, with natural gas and cut emissions 50%. And by the way, in some of those cities which I've been to in China, you can hardly breathe on it certain days. And so it's
Mm.
not just an environmental issue; it's a health issue, and so it's
Indeed.
the people of that country. And so I think there's all kinds of good reasons to do what we can to send more gas to China.
Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.